We have reached the conclusion of my college football playoff quarterfinal predictions, and even though Ohio State Oregon is probably being circled as the best quarterfinal game, this one is going to intrigue the eye as well. It's the nightcap on New Year's Day. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish took care of business in their first round game against the Indiana Hoosiers, and we'll tell you more about that one as this video goes along. The Georgia Bulldogs are back on top, champions of the SEC, but they are going to be without their starting quarterback in Carson Beck. That means Gunnar Stockton is going to take over, and who knows what he is going to provide in a playoff atmosphere. It's the All-State Sugar Bowl, a college football playoff quarterfinal from the Big Easy in New Orleans. We'll tell you everything you need to know about the Irish and the Bulldogs here in just a little bit. What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel. Welcome to the final college football playoff quarterfinal prediction. And if you want to hear anything that I have to say about the college football playoff, please go back and watch my other videos. And if you're as big of a college football nerd as I am, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you know when all of my future videos come out regarding everything else happening around college football, and most importantly, about the college football playoff. Thank you for supporting me in any way you do. Interact with the channel any way you can. If it's simply just kicking back, relaxing, open up a snack and a beverage and watching this video, I greatly appreciate that. You can also like, you can comment, you can share, and you can do anything else to help support the channel. Again, as long as you interact with it in some way, shape, and form. But if you want to support me outside of YouTube, then go give me a follow on Twitter or Instagram. It's at TailgateNate29. You can look at some interviews, games I cover, highlights, the games I call, articles I write, and everything else that I do within the sports media realm. Kind of my New Year's resolution. I'm going to start posting a little bit more on social media. But no matter how you support me, I greatly appreciate all the support. Let's dive on in to the final quarterfinal matchup that we have to talk about here on the channel. It's between the Irish and the Bulldogs, and this one, you can go layers, layers, layers deep. I'll go as deep as I can here in this one, but Notre Dame coming off a thrashing against the Indiana Hoosiers, a 27-17 defeat, although again, that game was probably 27-10, maybe 27-3 at best. Notre Dame let their foot off the gas, and Indiana was able to work back into that game. Now, Notre Dame wasn't able to slow it down, and it made it a little bit closer, but the point of the matter is that was a dominant game from start to almost finish, and a good win for Notre Dame. I think sort of reminding people how good this Notre Dame team is, and they get to go up against a beaten, battered Georgia team that arguably is not as good as some of the Georgia teams we've seen in recent years, but this is a Georgia team that will out-physical you, will be the more physical team on the field, and we know they can still go win a college football playoff national championship. How do we do preview predictions here on the channel? Well, we're going to take a deep dive into some keys to the game when each team possesses the football. So we first are going to take a look at this Notre Dame offense against this Bulldog defense, and then we'll flip it. We'll take a look at Georgia's defense against, or I should say Georgia's offense against Notre Dame's defense at the end of the video. We'll go ahead and take a look at some extra keys to the game, how I think this game is going to play out, as well as give you a prediction for who I think is going to come away a winner in the All-State Sugar Bowl and move on to the college football playoff quarterfinals. All right, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Notre Dame, I give you Georgia. Let's start by talking about this Fighting Irish offense. A lot of people, and I've said this about Notre Dame before, but it seems to always be brought back up, so I'm going to keep saying it until it stops because it has to. Notre Dame's loss to NIU is bad, but it doesn't define who this team is. You look at the rest of their schedule, they dominated almost every single other opponent that they had to play. They took care of business, and it's why they are in this position. Even against an Indiana team that had an 11-1 record, that played some really good football throughout points this year, Notre Dame handled that business. They went and dominated them. Now, Georgia is a different beast, yes, but this is a Notre Dame team that I feel can match up with what Georgia does. Now, Georgia probably, until proven otherwise, will always be the most physical team on the field. Now, again, sneaky little thing about Georgia, run defense is not as good as it was last year, or I should say the past 2 or 3 years, and the pass defense definitely also not as good. What Georgia is still good at is they're still good at getting off the field on third down, and they still are good, again, maybe not as good, but still good at being able to provide pressure to the opposing quarterback. Basically, when you take a look at this Georgia defense, everything you know about the Georgia defenses of old, I should just say over the past 2 or 3 years, has been dumbed down a little bit. But this is still a very aggressive, very threatening defense that can get pressure to the quarterback, that can force takeaways, and will out physicality you from start to finish. They will not take their foot off of the gas pedal. But let's talk about this Notre Dame offense. What are some of the ways that they're going to be able to beat this Georgia defense? Well, the run game. Be able to establish that on the ground. When opponents establish the run game against Georgia, that's when their defense gets on their heels. That's when they start to have a little bit more trouble, and Jeremiah Love can do exactly that for this Irish team. 1,057 yards and 16 touchdowns on the season for Jeremiah Love. Riley Leonard can do that as well. Now, I think a similar key to what Riley Leonard, I thought, had to do against Indiana, and it ended up not really mattering all that much. I think he's got to be able to find a rhythm through the air and with his legs. With his legs, he's got 15 rushing touchdowns and over 750 rushing yards this year. With his arm, almost 2,300 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 6 picks. Yeah, that's not a stat line that's going to absolutely wow you. It's not a stat line that's going to strike fear into this Georgia defense, but they do know what Riley Leonard is capable of, and couple that with a very effective physical run game behind a physical offensive front. Notre Dame is a really good offense. They love to set the tone by running the football first. But again, I'm going to touch on this right now because I think it's that important. It's my very top key down there. Riley Leonard has got to be able to create big plays. Riley Leonard has got to be able to find things through the air and with his legs, because if it's just Jeremiah Love that's going to affect this game, I don't think it's really going to go all that well for Notre Dame. Riley Leonard has got to have an impact on this game, period, end of story. Let's take a look at what this Notre Dame offense did against Indiana. I mean, first of all, the defense was outstanding, but we'll talk about that later. Jeremiah Love, 8 carries, 108 yards, and 1 touchdown. Now, 98 of those came on a 1 run. That was his touchdown run. And otherwise, this is a Notre Dame offense that really was held pretty darn well by the Indiana run defense. Riley Leonard, only 2.7 yards per carry, and Jadarian Price, only 2.9 yards per carry. So this is a Notre Dame team that was slowed down by Indiana's run defense, apart again from that 98-yard run that Jeremiah Love was able to break off. But Riley Leonard, 201 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Everything that Notre Dame did against Indiana has to just be improved at least by a factor of 2. They've got to be able to be dynamic on the ground. Riley Leonard has got to be able to find more big plays. And I'm not saying Riley Leonard has got to throw for over 400 yards, because that would be just multiplying his passing yards by 2. I just think he's got to create some bigger plays. He's got to be able to create a little bit more downfield, and he especially has got to get this Georgia defense reeling and confused by trying to defend the quarterback run on top of everything else that Notre Dame throws at you from an offensive standpoint. Now, the Irish run game, I think, also has to match the physicality of Georgia, because that is what the, not necessarily matchup advantage is going to be for Georgia, but it is just what the overall mindset and the overall ability of these two teams, that's where the advantage is going to lie. Georgia, again, I said it earlier this year, not earlier this year, or well, I probably did say it earlier this year, but earlier this video especially, until proven otherwise, on the football field, Georgia will be the more physical team. I expect them to be the more physical team here against Notre Dame. I also think Notre Dame can match the physicality level, but we'll talk more about that towards the end of the video. This Irish run game, apart from that 98-yard run, it really struggled to find a consistent rhythm against this Indiana team. And Riley Leonard had to be able to move the ball downfield with his arm. I think it could end up being a pretty similar story here. Now, I think Notre Dame is going to have watched a lot of tape. They're going to have seen a lot about this Georgia team, and I think that they're going to be able to have a little bit better of a running plan, or I should say a little bit better of a game plan for running the football than what they did in the game against Indiana. But they got to match that physicality level. The offensive line has got to create some pushback and have got to be able to create holes like the kind that allowed Jeremiah Love to go 98 yards down the field and get into the end zone at first 6 points. But the pass rush and making things uncomfortable, that is where the matchup advantage lies in for Georgia. Notre Dame's offensive line last year was great. It's still been really good this year. It's not as good as it was last season. And being able to affect the quarterback and get Riley Leonard down and not let Riley Leonard get outside of the pocket, the pass rush, negative plays, getting Notre Dame out of their offensive rhythm and doing things that they maybe necessarily are not prepared to do, that is going to play into the hands of Georgia tremendously. So now let's talk about this Georgia offense because it is going to be without its starting quarterback. Carson Beck got hurt on the final play of the first half in the SEC championship game against Texas. Now, Georgia was still able to go out and win the SEC championship game, but it was, in my opinion, not due to the effort that Gunnar Stockton, the backup, was able to provide. Sure, he only had 4 incompletions. He was 12 of 16 for 71 yards, but didn't throw a touchdown, didn't really look all that dynamic. And it was the Georgia offense that earlier in the year had trouble finding that 1 or 2 guys that's going to be able to be a dynamic weapon down the field and to be able to create big play potential through the air. Gunnar Stockton, I don't know if he's going to be able to provide that, but you really don't know what Gunnar Stockton's going to be able to provide. We haven't seen him play a whole lot this year, and he threw 16 passes in the SEC championship game, sure, but I don't think he really flashed a lot of what he's really capable of. Now, Georgia has seen this storyline before. They had a quarterback situation, quarterback injuries, and then it ended up being a guy by the name of Stetson Bennett coming in, and everyone was like, who is this guy? This guy clearly sucks. He's not going to do anything. And then he turned out, to be a pretty darn solid player, and he led Georgia to a couple of national championships. So, could the same be said for Gunnar Stockton here? Sure, because we've seen it before. We saw it before with Stetson Bennett. Gunnar Stockton can be that guy, but I think he's got to be able to form chemistry with this wide receiver room pretty darn fast. I think he's got to be able to find some downfield threats, but all in all, he just possesses a huge wild card factor that I can't even begin to try to explain to you how I think Gunnar Stockton is going to look, because I genuinely just have no idea. When you take a look at what Gunnar Stockton has done throughout the year, 25 of 32, 206 yards, no touchdowns, and 1 pick. Again, has not really shown us that much to say, oh yeah, he can be Carson Beck. He can fill into this role nicely. I'm not saying he's not going to. I'm not saying he's going to. I am completely in the dark about that now. From everything I've read, everything I've seen, it seems like they have full and immense confidence in Gunnar Stockton, but the experience has to come into play at some point, right? Carson Beck was a very experienced quarterback, and he's been in big moments before. Gunnar Stockton really hasn't been, and now you're going to throw him into a college football playoff quarterfinal. Stetson Bennett had some reps before an SEC championship game, before a college football playoff appearance, to sort of get himself ramped into the system. Gunnar Stockton has had very, very few of those moments, and this Notre Dame defense, man, if they play as well as they did against Indiana, it is going to be a challenge for Stockton to get any sort of rhythm at all against this Notre Dame team. Let's take a look at what they did against Indiana. Again, up until the very end, they were able to get pressure to work. They were able to slow things down. And yeah, they again took their foot off the gas towards the end. They allowed 278 yards, but you could really say Notre Dame probably allowed only 150 yards in that game that mattered, right? Where Indiana was still in that game, where they were still fighting. And not saying they weren't still fighting towards the end, but Notre Dame did let their foot up off the gas pedal. Notre Dame, from what they did from a pressure standpoint, 3 sacks, 10 tackles for loss. That is going to be massive in this game. If you can pressure Gunnar Stockton and you can get him uncomfortable early and not allow him to establish a rhythm, guess how big of an advantage that plays for Notre Dame? Up here. I hope I am off the screen, but up here, just a demonstrous advantage if Notre Dame is able to make Gunnar Stockton uncomfortable. Again, Stockton poses a huge wild card factor, yes. This Notre Dame defense really doesn't. You know what you're going to get. You know you're going to get a physical team that can defend in that secondary, might have one of, if not the best secondary in all of college football. It's a great third down defense. It forces a ton of turnovers. It's able to generate some pressure, and it's going to be able, I think, to do all those things against this Georgia offense that I think early will look to try to establish some sort of rhythm with Gunnar Stockton. Now, when you take a look at what happened in the SEC championship game, you're saying, Nate, why does it matter? Gunnar Stockton was the quarterback. The Georgia offense looked fine, and they still won the SEC championship game. I think the Georgia offense can play better than what they showed with Stockton at the helm in the SEC championship game, and it was the defense just not allowing Texas to get anything going with the run, forcing Quinn Ewers to make bad decisions with the football, and the Georgia run game that really helped take over that one. And this is a Notre Dame team that, look, defended the run really, really well against the Indiana Hoosiers. 27 carries, only 63 yards. That's 2.3 yards per carry. But when you go back and you look at what Georgia did against Texas in the SEC championship game, again, it was that run game that really helped find a spark. 3.8 yards per carry doesn't sound that impressive, but Trevor Etienne, getting him back was massive. 2 touchdowns, 16 carries, 94 yards. He was a really, really big piece to why Georgia was able to go win that game. And I think he even got that game-winning rushing touchdown in overtime to win Georgia the SEC championship game. You heard me say it earlier, so I'll say it again. Just very, very briefly, make Gunnar Stockton, make the running backs uncomfortable in that backfield. If you can create pressure, you don't allow Gunnar Stockton to get any sort of rhythm, and you can slow Trevor Etienne, Nate Frazier, and the rest of this running back room down, Notre Dame is going to be able to set the tone with their defense. And they forced some turnovers against Indiana. They created all sorts of havoc. You got to do the same thing on what is going to be a more physical Georgia offensive front. But the Irish, here's one big key that you're not going to see on the stat sheet that I think plays into Notre Dame's hands very, very well. When Notre Dame gets opposing players in open space, meaning when guys break out for huge runs and they have to try to break into that second level, Notre Dame is great at not missing those tackles. They just don't miss tackles in the open field. That is what makes this defense so special, and it's also what I think is going to lead to Georgia having some trouble creating those big plays. And they love forcing turnovers. Notre Dame loves forcing turnovers, especially if this Notre Dame team is able to get Gunnar Stockton in just uncomfortable situations where he is looking to throw on the run or he is looking to try to make a desperation throw, throwing into coverage. If Notre Dame can get pressure to him, can get pressure to this backfield, that only bodes well for this team. It'll mean Gunnar Stockton is on his heels. Maybe they're able to slow down the run game, and Notre Dame can make some momentum-shifting turnovers here. Georgia, I think, very, very slightly has the physicality edge, but I think Notre Dame can match it, and I think they do match it. I think Notre Dame's ability to slow down the big plays is going to hurt Georgia here. I think they're going to sort of struggle to find this rhythm, and I'm just going to call this one. My gut tells me Notre Dame is going to win this game. Riley Leonard, I think, is going to be a huge, high-impact player for the Fighting Irish in this contest. I also do believe that Jeremiah Love, he's going to show us more than what he showed us in the game against Indiana. You take out that 98-yard run, he had 7 carries for 10 yards. That's not Jeremiah Love. I think we see the real Jeremiah Love here in this game. Maybe he's able to rip off a big run here and there as well. And the experience level, you take Carson Beck out and Gunnar Stockton in, Riley Leonard is a senior quarterback. This is a very experienced Notre Dame team that has a lot of experience defensively. And sure, Georgia's got experience up and down the field, but the quarterback position is where they don't. And I think it's going to cost them here in this game. I think the pressure that Notre Dame's able to bring will slow Gunnar Stockton down, will get him rattled, especially if Notre Dame's able to get out to this hot start. Very close, very, very hotly contested game. In fact, I'd be shocked if Georgia doesn't have the lead throughout some points here. And it also wouldn't shock me to see Georgia win the game. I just don't think it's going to pan out that way. I got Notre Dame winning this one 23-21. They will move on and play in a college football playoff semifinal, at least according to me. But I want to know, according to you, who wins this matchup? Tell me what you think in the comment section down below. Go watch my other quarterfinal preview videos. Remember to play hard but tailgate harder, and I'll see all you guys in the next video. Goodbye.